This is a brief introduction of what the whole process of discovery was. The origins of pharaonic civilization have always been shrouded in mystery. What caused dynastic cultures to burst forth in the Nile Valley within such a relatively short period of time? It has long been recognized that the emergence of pharaonic rule, this is the pharaohs now, not the indigenous people, coincided with an entirely unprecedented series of phenomena which form the recognizable foundation of what we identify as pharaonic Egypt. Okay? So we're dealing with the elites, we're not dealing with the ordinary people. We're dealing with the people in charge of the country. Now, these innovations that occur at the particular period I'm going to show you include decorated lug-handled pottery, stone vessels appear for the first time, zoomorphic vessels, a carved slate palette like the one you see here, pear-shaped mace heads. I'll deal with that a little bit later. You'll understand that better a little bit later on. Military standards. So we see for the first time where the followers of Horus are carrying the standards, insignia of their different clans. High-prowed boats. This is a key factor that we see featured in this period. Mud brick architecture. The niched facade, palace facade, I'll explain that a little bit later too. Early writing occurs at this time, and then kingship. Before this time we have no kings in Egypt. The Nakada I period, we call it, is from around 4400 BC. Then we have Nakada II, which is a different culture. And in between here, around 3500 BC, we get our first contact with Mesopotamia at this time. Okay, so indigenous valley peoples, here something new comes in, and we have this contact arriving between the two. And then there's a Nakada III period, which is an advanced culture. This is where we start to see the kings appearing for the first time here. And again, we have a secondary contact with Mesopotamia between Nakada II and Nakada I. Another motif we see reflecting later on in history with the tombs is this concept of a ship being dragged by its crew. Here, the crew are dragging the ship across the desert. We see lots of these types of drawings in the desert. Here's another very big example of it, where we have the big boat with lots of people in, and we have the rope and we have the crew dragging the boat. Now, all this stuff we found probably in the region of more than 1,000 boats have been discovered so far, and we've only scratched the surface here. Why do we have so many boats in the desert between the Red Sea and the Nile is a big question. Why aren't these drawings along the Nile? Why don't we see them in the Sahara? We only see them here. This is not all indigenous. As Robert pointed out very rightly, there is an indigenous population which we could call African, which comes from sub-Sahara and populates the Nile Valley. When the land begins to desiccate and the Sahara starts to dry up, they move into the Nile Valley. They're cattle herders, they worship Hathor, they are very important to astronomy, they're very important to religion, but there's this second element which comes in later, and the two marry together to create pharaonic civilization. It's the combination of those two cultures which make pharaonic civilization. What we think happened was that the pre-Sumerians come from Eridu, they sail down to trade with Dilmun and Magan and Meluha in their vessels, and eventually they decide to sail around the Arabian Gulf, past Punt, into the Red Sea, and cross to form the two kingdoms of Upper Egypt, dragging their vessels across the desert at the shortest point between the Red Sea and the Nile, bringing their Mesopotamian vessels with them, dragging them across the sand, relaunching them in the Nile, and then defeating the Nilotic peoples with their crescent-shaped boats to become the first dynasty of pharaohs.